In this video, I am going to show you how to do a back stitch. So a back stitch is another type of stitch you can use. We did a small back stitch at the end of our running stitch demonstration, but a back stitch is a little bit more secure, takes a little bit more time, uses a little bit more thread, but it also has other practical applications too. So I'm just going to use the same piece of cloth. I've already traced out a couple of different lines on here that I was planning to use as a sampler anyway. And don't worry about the V. I'm still sewing face to face, even though this is just a technique demonstration. So I already have my thread. I'm gonna do this in blue so I can tell my videos apart. You can think blue is for backstitch. Again, if I were doing this into something a little bit more complete, I would do something that's closer in color to this fabric. I have this knotted. I have a nice tidy knot at the end. I've already snipped the ends even. And I'm gonna do my best not to tangle my thread any more than I just did. Uh-oh. Okay. So if I were sewing a seam, I would want to start, a quarter or so of an inch from the end. I'm going to still stick to that rule. I'm going to go, oops, I'm sorry, I misplaced that. There we go. I'm going to go down, then I'll come back up on the other side. But instead of going up and down and alternating, I'm going to go backwards next to where I put my thread in. You guys can see I put it right next to the knot. I didn't put it through the knot, I just put it next to it. And then I'm going to pull up on the other side of where my thread came from. Ideally, you want this area and this area to be pretty close to the same. So let me pull this up here so you guys can see. Right, I want this distance and this distance to be pretty close to the same so my stitches stay even. That takes a lot of practice, so don't worry if you don't get it on the first try. Here I'm making fairly large stitches so that you can see them a bit better. Then I'm going to insert my needle, again, very close, but not directly into the same spot as that last stitch. I think I shot that one a little shy, so I'm going to pull my needle back out. It's pretty close. I'll take it. And adjust my tension. I'm going to do one more and I'll show you the back. It can be kind of hard when you're first learning how to sew to not just keep sticking your fingers on the reverse. It's okay. Everyone learns. Just go slowly. Don't try to force anything through. Right? If you're trying to just jab through your cloth, that's a really good way of pricking yourself. If you find that it's continually a problem, you can always get a thimble. Right? Thimbles are really cheap. It's good protection on the other side. I usually use a thimble, but not today. So now that I've gotten 3 more or less complete stitches done, I want to show you a couple things. First, if you take a look, there we go. If you take a look at this, you'll see that my tension isn't very good. Before I go any further, I want to pull this a little bit tauter. I don't want my fabric leaving hills on top of my, I don't want my thread to be sort of like scallop edged or leaving hills on top of my fabric. But fortunately, just a little adjustment, let them lay down evenly. You'll notice that this makes a really pretty pattern on the front of wherever you're sewing, but it's not two-sided, right? So this is, I've done a fairly good job on this side, but you can see that while you could use this as a decorative element where things are kind of overlapping and running one over the other, this is really what you want your stitches to look like. So if you're doing something that where this stitch shows, there is a front and a back to this stitch. But if you're using it along the seam, say to make a very strong seam, much stronger than a running stitch would give you, it doesn't matter. And I'm gonna sew a few more stitches and show you guys how much more tension this is able to withstand. So I'm gonna go very close to that last stitch. I think that's a little short. There we go. Adjust my tension. Sometimes this can get a little bit confusing because it seems like you should only sew in one direction, but I think the look of this stitch and its security is definitely worth the extra effort. So even if you don't necessarily use it in a hand-sewn quilted square, it's got other applications too. This is also really commonly used in embroidery if you ever decide to go down that rabbit hole. It's just a good technique to know. Put just a couple more in here. Okay, and I'm actually starting to get kind of low on thread here. Right, this takes a lot more thread than a running stitch does. So you can see, again, although this looks relatively nice and tidy, I'm gonna check, make sure that my tension is consistent, right? Nothing is tangled up, nothing is raised too far off of the surface of the fabric. Same thing on this side. My stitches aren't completely perfect, but at least I've been able to make them consistently in a line. I want to show you though, if you were to use this for a seam, I haven't secured it at the end, so don't pay attention to things all the way at the bottom. You can see though that there's much less difference in tension than when we took a look at the running stitch, right? You can easily pull the running stitch and it leaves gaps. But because there's so much more pressure on either side of the fabric with a running stitch, or excuse me, with a back stitch, you would have less gapping. So whenever you need something that's more secure, a back stitch is your go-to. For the sake of time, let's say that I've completed my seam here and I want to go ahead and tie things off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go back down, finish this last stitch off. Then if this is exposed, then I kind of committed a grave error in making the knot on the side. You can tie a knot on the side, or I'm just gonna come back up on the side and tie a knot on the side so my knots are both on the same side. You could always use a knot as a design element. Right, I came in very close to that last stitch, but not through the exact same weave. So I've got my needle. I'm just going to tie a loop. So once it's close to there, I'll come back through. I like to hold my fabric down. I'm going to pull it. I kind of sometimes use my nail to coax the knot into place. And then I'm going to take my snips, cut the ends off. Doesn't have to be too long. And there you have it, the back stitch. So I'm going to show you, this is the front. And the back.